Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We are very, very excited to have everyone. Kindly give us a few more minutes, about 2, to allow other participants to join us, and we should be able to start with our discussion this afternoon. But again, thank you so much for joining CIPESA in this very interesting conversation. Hello, good afternoon once again. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon while we have a conversation on the impact of the Uganda's digital space on citizens' participation, democratic participation of the citizens. This afternoon, we have an interesting panel discussion, representation from civil society organizations. We have a member of parliament from specifically the Parliamentary Human Rights Committee. We also have a representative from the Uganda Human Rights Commission that will take us through this discussion. We have also a number of participants from different organizations in Uganda as we try to figure out which direction should we take when we're having a conversation of the democratic participation on the digital space. At this point, allow me to request that we all introduce ourselves in the chat room. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to put the question in the chat room, and we'll certainly make sure that we try to raise them up with our panelists to address them. But in the meantime, please do introduce yourselves, because if we allow everyone to, probably will take another 1 hour, but our meeting will take us 1 hour and 45 minutes. And so allow me to go straight to Mr. Eugene Wanyama, the legal officer from CIPESA, to give us a welcome remarks. And after that, I am hoping Ms. Fan Theodore is already here, who will be able to take us through, again, remarks from the East-West Management Institute. Adrian, you have the floor.
Thank you, Simwe. Ladies and gentlemen, I take this opportunity to welcome all of you to yet another important meeting where we're going to engage on digital rights and freedoms in this country and the impact of internet on democratic participation, including issues of governance and how internet plays out in Uganda. So CIPESA is an organization, a non-for-profit organization, which is based in Uganda, but working across the continent. And CIPESA works towards facilitating a dialogue and collaborations among diverse stakeholders on the roles and responsibilities of protecting and promoting internet rights through Africa. And this is mainly done through contributing to information and research and policy and legislative practices and the related environment in Africa. So in this cause where we are, this meeting is partly part of the joint efforts, or it's a multi-stakeholder approach where we're supported by USAID and with a number of actors that we're working with through the East-West Management Institute, the International Center for Not-for-Profit Law, and the collaborating partners, including Chapter 4, the National Coalition for Human Rights Defenders, the Legal Aid Services Providers Network, as a team that is working towards bettering the environment within which fundamental rights and freedoms in this country are enjoyed. But before I go any further into the discussions, I want to invite Fan, the Chief of Party from Freedom House, from the East-West Management Institute for this civil society strengthening activity, to give us a few opening remarks before we go into the panel discussions and general engagements from the members participating in the meeting. So over to you, Fan, if you can give us a few opening remarks. Oh, I can't see her. Maybe she dropped off. Sarah, I know you can hear me. I can see you're there. So if you can come in and give us a few remarks, and then we can proceed on to the next session. Sarah, over to you. Sarah Okware, can you hear us? All right, I think we will get to our colleagues that had asked to speak when probably they're actively present. They seem to have dropped off either due to network issues and so on. But once again, I want to draw your attention to the fact that this meeting is inspired by the different play out of how society has been in this country and how democracy is playing out in the different kinds of fields, both physically and digitally. But for today, we shall focus on the digital way through which democratic participation has actually been affected. And in this, we shall score or look into how the digital space has played out in touching people's participation in democracy, including in elections, including in access to information, participating in transparency and accountability, and also looking into how governance plays out in as far as the digital space is concerned, and how that actually affects democracy in Uganda. So with me, I want to welcome our key panelists who will be leading our discussions today. I can start by introducing Ruth Sekindi, who is here with us. Ruth is, if you can say hello to the people just briefly.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ruth Sekindi. I work with the Uganda Human Rights Commission.
And then Ruth Sekindi is the Monitoring and Inspection Director at the Uganda Human Rights Commission and has been in this field of human rights for quite some time. So we are very glad to have you, Ruth, in this meeting. And then we have Honorable Odul Jonathan from Parliament. If you can say hello to the people, Honorable.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone.
Good afternoon. So Honorable Odul Jonathan is a member of Parliament representing a Rute South constituency in Lira district. He's a member also of the Human Rights Committee of Parliament. And before he actually got to this level, he widely worked with civil society organizations in the region where he comes from. And in this area, he has really gathered a lot of knowledge and understood how the scape of human rights plays out from all arenas, online and offline, and how it affects people's participation in politics and democracy and other spheres of their lives. And finally, we have Mr. Robert Chiranga. If you can say hello to the people.
Thank you, Adrian. Good afternoon to you all, and I'm glad to be part of this dialogue. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome, Robert. Robert is the Executive Director of the National Coalition for Human Rights Defenders in Uganda, an organization that really works towards defending human rights of those who fight for rights of others. He's a CSO actor, an activist for human rights, and he's been a human rights defender for quite some time in this country. So today, our be informed by a few things that we want to look into and see how the different key players, that is Human Rights Commission, the Parliament, and civil society, what has been happening, how things are played out, what is likely to happen, and what the future actually holds for all of us in this country in as far as democratic participation online is concerned. So I'll go straight to asking a few questions to our moderators who will open up the space in which we shall widely interact on these very issues that affect us on a daily basis. So maybe to start with, I think ladies first. Let me start with MS Ruth Sekindi. Would like you to highlight briefly on what, for example, the role of the digital space is, for example, in light of the work of the Uganda Human Rights Commission in the realization of democratic rights of Ugandans. Over to you, Ruth.
Thank you very much. I don't know whether I can leave my video off for network purposes so that you don't lose me. Allow me to keep my video off. Okay. Okay. When we talk about digital democracy, digital space in the advent of democracy, there are things that come to your mind. I note that in the advent of internet, the way we live has changed. It has changed the way we interact. So that definitely means that democracy and the way we knew how democracy works has to change or is changing. Back in the days, you used to wait for the president to speak, you used to wait for the news, you used to have meetings to discuss issues of democracy, you used to wait for your MPs to come to your areas to speak. Right now, the internet has changed all that. And so when we're talking about digital space and issues of democracy, we have to go back to Article 19 of the UDHR, that is the mother of all rights. And it's the same article under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights that gives everyone the right to receive and impart information. And in that right, we have the right to freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, the media freedoms, and all those are elements of democracy. So when we look at the role of digital space in Uganda, we note that when we talk of digital space, we are in essence talking about digital democracy. How are we looking at democracy digitally? Right now, however, we note that only 50% of Ugandans can access internet. does it mean that 50% is a representative of the whole country? Can we say that we have sufficient democracy when we use digital spaces? In 2021, this year, when we're going for elections, we said we're going to have a digital election. And we saw how hard it was for us to have digital election. How many political parties or even persons standing for political office could use the internet, could use television, could use radio, because majority of our Ugandans cannot access these services. Internet is not reaching in many places. When we were starting this meeting, I was talking to Robert, and my video is off because of connectivity. How accessible is it? How many Ugandans can afford a phone or a laptop or a tablet that costs 3 million or 1 million? And the cheapest mobile, or what do you call it, smartphone is at least 100,000. How many Ugandans can afford it when we're talking about digital democracy? If we are going to use the media space, if we're going to use digital space to promote democracy, but all that is not lost. I note that through digital spaces, we Ugandans are able to access these freedoms. People are able to speak. Many people are shy, but when they are on their phone and they think no one is watching them, they are able to put their views forward. Through the internet or through digital spaces, we've been able to get information that was hidden for years, okay? The most top secret ceases to be secret anymore. And that's why on the groups we see a lot of information that previously used to be classified, but then Ugandans are able to discuss and determine the way they want to be led and how they want to be led. So digital space has given people platforms and space to share views. We're able to share opinions. We're able to ask for accountability that previously would not. I mean, you'd have to wait for your MP to appear before you say, why did you do this? You'd have to wait for the president. I don't know whether you'd even be given that space for you to be able to ask questions. But right now, people are able to go to take to the internet and ask the hard questions that not anyone can ask. We're able to receive and impart information. Everyone has become a journalist. So through digital spaces, citizens can request for accountability. We are asking for transparency, and we have cut out the bureaucracy. It has helped us cut out the bureaucracy of accessing information. That is why we came up with the Access to Information Act. How do you get information from the state agencies? It is so hard. So, so it has limited the fear of reprisals so that anyone at whatever age, it doesn't matter the status, you can access information. And also, still on that question, I know the digital space has eased the way we communicate to our leaders because it has helped persons with disabilities to access and speak up. People, and I note that if we use the digital democracy, we'll be able to reach the people who previously did not have voices, and that is persons with disabilities. And if we use digital spaces, we can use it into voting, the electoral processes. And through that, I'm saying inmates can then be able to vote using the internet, digital space. Persons in the diaspora will be able to vote. Persons in security agencies who never get a chance when they're manning and guarding ballot papers will be able to vote. Observers, election observers who always miss out will be able to vote. So the rights are not simply about digital space has enabled us to elevate and promote these resultant rights of freedom of expression. So, but we have to know that rights are not about rights, but they go hand in hand with responsibilities. So the rights holders are put to book through digital space. So thank you so much. I hope I haven't spoken too much, Adrian, just about issues of digital space and democratic rights. Over to you. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Picking on from where Madam Ruth has actually stopped, she raises pertinent issues, especially to do, and she affirms that the internet or the digital space is important because it would enhance transparency and accountability. And this is where I want to draw this to Honorable Odul's attention and inquire of his view, for example, if indeed what Madame Ruth speaks about has actually yielded much, and what really the role of Parliament is in ensuring democratic participation in this country, especially through the online platforms. Over to you, Honorable Odul.
Well, thank you very much. I want to thank you, our hosts and fellow panelists, especially Madame Ruth, that has given us a very good background on the topic of today. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, the role of Parliament is very clear, but I will explain it in the context of our discussion this afternoon. Parliament basically has the responsibility of putting in place legislation that makes it easy for people to live in peace, for people to conduct their businesses and be able to live in a healthy environment. And when we speak about digital space, as Madam has put it, we are basically discussing areas where citizens or Ugandans have the environment and space to express themselves and also participate in key decisions that touch their lives. I would like to start by stating that Parliament has done its bit by putting in place the key pieces of legislation that touches the matter at hand. I would want to bring to the attention of the meeting that first, in terms of means and modes of communication, the Uganda Communication Act, which is a body which provides for the body that regulates our digital space in Uganda, the Uganda Communication Commission, the UCC. And Madame Ruth has mentioned about radios, mobile phones, televisions, and I think social media. All these fall under the mandate of the regulator, the Uganda Communications Commission. Of course, Uganda Communications Commission does not work alone. We also have others like the Uganda Broadcasting Corporation Act, which provides for the existence of UBC, radios and television. And all these are there to ensure that there is a platform for our citizens to express themselves. Of course, later on, we'll be able to see some of the challenges that come with it. Parliament also has a role in most cases, which is delegated to the ministers, of providing for policies and regulations. And these policies and regulations are to give effect to provisions of the acts, the different acts of Parliament. The acts itself also give effect to the provisions of the Constitution as cited by Madame Ruth. Of course, some of the provisions in the Constitution are coming from the international instruments like the United Nations Declarations on Human Rights. So for Parliament to be able to help and put in place mechanisms for the citizens to enjoy these rights, we also have to take care of the second angle of legislation, which is the tax laws. You will recall that to be able to access mobile phones, you have to buy data, you have to buy airtime, and all these have components of taxation in them. More recently, of course, you saw how there was a big outcry from the public about the increment in the percentage of taxes attributed to data and airtime. So this is a role that squarely falls at the feet of Parliament to ensure that the accessibility to the digital space itself, let alone taking advantage of the digital space to express, but the accessibility aspect is dealt with. And Parliament also is responsible for holding the executive accountable. And there are a number of ways we do this. Madam Ruth works with Uganda Human Rights Commission, which is a constitutional body. That constitutional body and a number of other bodies also account to Ugandans through Parliament, through their annual reports, which reports also capture components of democratization. And I must add that there are a number of ways that Parliament is able to do this. You have seen interaction with ministers. You have seen how checks and balances, oversight visits to different institutions. You have seen how Parliament processes the ministerial policy statements that basically touches on key areas of digital space and how Ugandans access this. Now, when we talk about democracy, we would want to lift it up a bit up to the active group in terms of politics, people who are registered to vote, the 18 and above, and I think there are about 18 million voters according to the data from statistics from the Electoral Commission. So are these 18 million voters all able to access the digital space? Do they have radios? And radio is the most common and cheapest. But in areas like in Elgon areas, in Bukwo districts, some parts of Karamoja, radios in Uganda are not known there. They don't even have access. They cannot listen to it. We have talked about mobile phones, let alone the type of mobile phones that people have, the ones that can only receive maybe short messages. How about the ones that can access social media? How many people are able to get that? Of the 18, we should be actively participating in our democracy. You come to television sets, which coverage is very poor and very low. And now, lastly, you come to access to social media, which needs some specific gadgets, the smartphones, to be able to access that. So when you combine this, you feel that probably there are still big gaps, although you could note that Ugandans have picked up a lot more interest in using the digital space, even when in the last elections there were restrictions, but you could still assume that some candidates probably wouldn't have gone very far or wouldn't have even obtained the number of votes they did without the digital space. I can imagine, for example, the presidential candidates who had to traverse the whole country. They did not have the means and they resorted to using the digital space. The Facebook was very active, Twitter and WhatsApp messages were flying all over. And I can be sure that some of the candidates were able to get the number of votes they did because of the availability of the digital space that existed at that time. So in summary, the key role that Parliament does is to ensure that there is appropriate legislation in place. They may never be adequate because there are gaps we keep seeing coming in new areas day in and day out. Parliament does process tax laws, and these tax laws have big consequence implication on access to the digital space. And also Parliament puts in place appropriate resources for the relevant institution, for example, UBC, radio and television, to be able to reach out to all Ugandans. There may be inadequacy in some of the areas, but that could be my summary of the role of Parliament in this area. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Honorable. And of course, you raise some issues, and you kind of end with asking questions or posing questions that are similar to those which Ms. Ruth Sekindi raised, especially in terms of access and so on. And of course, the role of Parliament is coming out clear, especially the legislative role. But from that, we want to really ask a key pertinent question that will most importantly be responded to by Mr. Robert Chiranga. Mr. Robert Chiranga, as you're aware, there have been quite a number of laws that have been enacted by Parliament, some of which have been mentioned by Honorable Odul, and at least you have interfaced with the way actually these laws have been applied, to the extent that sometimes there's a question of doubt in people's minds as to whether indeed the Parliament plays an independent role, or the judiciary actually plays a role that is independent, or that the executive is actually checked in the exercise of its powers. So in respect of this and the developments that have been going, Mr. Robert Chiranga, what could you concretely state to be the role of civil society and what they've actually done as a watchdog of government actions in this country, in as far as digital democracy is concerned?
Thank you very much, Edwin. I would like also to express my appreciation to my fellow panelists, Madam Ruth Sechindi from the National Human Rights Institution and Honorable Dur from the House of Legislature. Thank you for that question. In terms of the role of civil society, I think it's very clear that whereas Honorable Dur and his team passes laws, it's not their business to educate the public on which laws they have passed. That's when civil society really comes in to create awareness on the different legal and policy framework that exists in terms of the rights to participation, especially using also digital space, the Access to Information Act, and other laws such as the Misuse of the Computer Act, the UCCA Act that sets up the regulatory body, and the other institutions such as the Uganda Broadcasting Corporation as a public broadcaster. So creating awareness to the civic citizens is one of the roles played by civil society to ensure that they enhance participation online and offline. Of course, one other fundamental role we play is advocacy and lobbying for an enabling environment, especially the same policy and legal framework, and also to ensure that the internet infrastructure is improved to influence or to enhance participation online or offline. So by writing policy briefs, by having meetings with members of parliament, especially the committees that deal with in terms of enhancing participation within the digital space. Of course, we also do production of literature that talks about these digital rights, which of course is mainly used by young people because young people seem to be have more capabilities in terms of making use of digital space. And then, of course, there's litigation, especially public interest litigation on any pieces of legislation or any other incidents that may hinder the enjoyment or the enhancement of participation. We, of course, also carry out different dialogues with different partners, including state and non-state actors, to talk about the different challenges that civil society and citizens face in trying to enjoy the digital space. For example, issues of infrastructure being poor, issues of access to information. We have a piece of legislation, but you can't fully utilize it in spite of even having guidelines. Not all public servants understand that piece of legislation exists. Some continue to challenge citizens by asking them who are they to ask for such information. So there are still challenges in making use of such laws. And therefore, we always have this country or dialogues with different actors to talk about the challenges we face in trying to enjoy digital space, in trying to enjoy the right to participate as envisaged under Article 38, which also is a challenge in a sense that many citizens do not know that they have a right to participate in the governance affairs of their country through either their elected representatives like Dr. Dur or through their own civic organizations. So briefly, that's what civil society does in terms of enhancing participation online or offline.
Yeah, thank you very much, Robert. You seem to speak of a twofold approach in dealing with aspects of democratic participation online. And it appears to spring, for example, from the government arm, which you're talking about the regulator and what they put in place to regulate the space, as well as the dimension of the citizenry participation and citizenry access, as others have raised. So in this, Mr. Chiranga, what do you consider to have been some of the biggest challenges or hindrances to the civil society role? Robert, over to you.
Thank you, Edwin. One of the major hindrances I think we have faced, especially after addressing the political question in 2021, were to do with the restrictive environment. You realize that whenever we are addressing a political question, the internet is switched off. So when you switch off the internet, you switch off such networks like Facebook, it means that people cannot, and you are not enhancing participation online or offline. Two, the interference in the work of civil society organizations by the state. When civil society organizations have a funding modality like DGF, and one time we wake up and you're told it's being suspended, it means that you can't carry out your activities that relate to enjoying participation online in terms of being able to access the internet because you do not have money to pay for it. Of course, we also have other laws that we find restrictive, like the Uganda Commissions Act, Communications Act, where they have wide powers on what they can do to radios where they have political debates. You have the Computer Misuse Act, which is vague with some provisions that are very vague. For example, what constitutes an offensive act? I can't send a message or share information and
Robert, we seem to be losing you. I don't know, it must be network.
So these young people, if they cannot afford internet, then they cannot make use of the digital space. The cost of internet infrastructure is not enabling as such. And of course, we have issues of safety and security, Edwin, that surveillance by security operatives leads to self-censorship. You cannot easily talk, you cannot easily share information because you know you are being surveilled. And of course, we've had the traditional office break-ins where civil society organizations have had to lose their digital tools, such as computers and phones, in terms of also being confiscated. When any of our civil society leaders is arrested, the first thing that they take are phones, and to be returned, it takes quite a time, or you may never receive them. So there's also the poor digital infrastructure, especially in the countryside. Few people can also make use of smartphones, which really is a requirement if you are to make use of the digital space. Few citizens can know how to operate a smartphone. It's something left for and that's why you have a wide digital divide. Of course, the shutdown of ICT infrastructure, as I indicated earlier, during certain times can also affect our enjoyment of these rights. So it's quite a lot of hindrances that affect us in terms of democratic rights. And we don't see the state coming up with an enabling environment to ensure that really we expand on our knowledge of digital rights, we expand on the use of these digital rights. Instead, we see them disenabling us to achieve all these rights.
Thank you very much, Robert. From your discussion, I think everybody can agree, even the members participating, that the challenges are real and the sting of the problems is quite hard, as you can see. And that would draw me to the next question that I would want to pose to Ms. Ruth Sekindi. Especially, I would like to hear your views or opinion on whether you can state that actually Uganda's digital space has in any way enhanced democracy and democratic engagements, also highlighting from a perspective of human rights institutions such as the Uganda Human Rights Commission, and whether you can actually firmly state that they've really contributed to enhancing democracy online. Over to you, Madam Ruth.
Thank you, Adrian. That's a tough question when you use the word firmly enhancing democracy. I can say that Uganda's digital space has improved democracy, or has improved the enhancement of democracy. I'll not use the word firm, because much as we have some gains, we also have many limitations, many of which have been already stated. So yes, when you look at the percentage of people using the internet and on matters of democracy, the number is increasing. We have seen bloggers, and you saw in the 2021 elections how bloggers became an important role, played an important role in our democratic processes. That would never have been considered. People like bloggers were a nobody, if I can use that word, before, but because we realized the importance of digital space, bloggers then played a critical role, even though we it's debatable whether they did it well or not, but they played a critical role in persuading or dissuading or annoying or sending information and misinformation and fake news. They played a critical role in the democratic processes and played a critical role in the decisions that people made during the election. So we can't really downplay the role of digital space. The fact that Uganda opened digital space where people can access WhatsApp and television and radio and internet is good, and it's commendable. However, we also noted we had some, we noticed challenges where on the election date, the switching off the internet, that meant that there was limitation in accessing information and people telling others where the vote is being rigged or the vote is being stolen. I mean, and so the exchange of information was limited in that way. Robert has talked about the laws and the limitation in laws, and I shall not belabor that. So much as we have made gains, we have made, we also face a lot of challenges when it comes to enhancing democracy and through digital spaces. So, so while people can access internet and social media, we still also have challenges of OTT. Now, while the state has to collect taxes for the development of the country, we understand. But if we want to enhance internet use, if we want students to be able to study, if we want people to be able to debate, and every person in Uganda being able to access the internet, then OTT is something that we should consider scrapping. And as a commission, we've come out to say, to call on the scrapping of the OTT because it limits accessibility. We have noted that Facebook was switched off. It was another platform where people were discussing issues of democracy, issues that pertain them, issues pertaining their leaders. And it's incumbent upon the leadership to listen to the voices of the people. So when we switch off another voice or another avenue of accessing information regarding and democracy, then that's a big challenge. And then there is still a lot of also irresponsible use of the internet. Much as we are talking about democracy, we note that there's so much irresponsible use, particularly when it comes to fake news, misinformation, disinformation, cyberbullying. As a human rights institution, we don't take this lightly because we monitor human rights situations in the country. And we have chased the wind many times where they say so many people have been killed. We are supposed to be there. You go there and there's no one. So, and yet this is being promoted. They get pictures from other countries and bring them here. We try to conduct investigations and fact-finding to ensure that people are not being killed or butchered. And you find that it's fake news, but someone took the trouble to do this. All this affects democracy, because then, it becomes very expensive to verify facts. But then we also, just because there's some irresponsible users, should not deter the use of the internet, should not sway government away from enabling citizens of Uganda access the internet. The other thing I wanted to speak about is that it is good that we have as a country, we have made strides, but these strides are limited to the literate and the semi-illiterate. The person like my mother cannot use that digital, is not able to use that digital space for democratic purposes. They still prefer having their member of parliament appear before them and speak to them. So the fact that digital spaces are limited to literacy, just even accessing information and maneuvering through a phone or a tablet, plus the expenses involved, we note that when it comes to democracy and digital spaces in our country, it is the literate and semi-illiterate that in many cases have been able to use these gadgets for information and for democratic purposes. For the ordinary person, who are the majority, this is a no-go area. It's somewhere we have not been able to adopt. But, and still I want to go back to the misuse. The misuse has not only affected democracy, but we have noted that there's a lot of, while we're promoting democracy, there's a lot of hate speech, because in the name of democracy and digital space, we have noted the promotion of tribalism and sectarianism in the name of democracy and digital space. We have noted issues of cyberbullying, where people use the extreme because they know they cannot be caught or the law cannot touch them. Human trafficking, exposing children to pornography and exposure of children to harmful content. So while we're talking about using digital spaces, we also should emphasize issues of responsible use of the digital space when it comes to democracy and the spaces. We should be respectful of each other. It derails the debate when we have persons who cannot tolerate positive criticisms, where people are abusive, where people are promoting sectarianism. I think this, we note that this derails the space of democracy and good governance. And both sides do it, the opposition and the ruling party. They are all, they all use foul language, they all use, and if you're following and trying to use this space for democratic purposes, good debates, and all that is lost. But be that as it may, I have to emphasize again that even though we have some irresponsible users, digital space has contributed to the promotion of democracy, access to information. It has given us a platform, or Ugandans a platform to debate. It has given Ugandans a platform to ask for accountability and transparency. It has brought out the hidden facts, hidden information that many people would never have seen, never have seen the light of day, but we're happy to have that information. And so we make informed decisions. So Ugandans make informed decisions based on the information that is out there. It is a good thing, but when we're talking about rights, we should also talk about responsibilities. Thank you, Adrian.
Yeah, thank you, Ruth, for that elaborate discussion. And of course, we seem to agree that while the internet is facilitative of the enjoyment of democratic rights, there have been those issues that have been rising, especially in relation to misinformation and disinformation, as you rightly raise them. And that would draw me to the aspect of actually the legal framework to which Honorable Odul family spoke about. And we have seen that There are those anomalies that arise from the usage of the digital platform, even for exercise of democratic rights. But we also agree that the laws, for example, that Honorable Odul mentioned, quite a number of laws, such as the Regulation of Interception of Communications Act, the Uganda Communications Act, the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2002, as amended severally up to 2017, and then other laws, we've seen that they actually promote surveillance on individuals, much as they come from Parliament, but they seem probably to legitimize the aspects of surveillance on individual rights and freedoms, and undermining their privacy and the free exercise of democratic rights. So on that, Honorable Jonathan Odul, would you really also state that Parliament has, or government has actually done enough to promote democratic participation online? Over to you, Honorable Odul.
Well, thank you very much. To answer that, I think I will tackle it twofold. First and foremost, in terms of putting in place the policy framework, in terms of putting in place the institutional setup, in terms of putting in place the human resource requirements, I think both Parliament and government has done that. Of course, when you see the different institutions that have been put in place, I've mentioned some during my first submission. If you see the quality of people government has put to man those offices, and you also see the various legislations, even the ones that you have mentioned that have been used badly. For example, the Computer Misuse Act that has been abused in many forms. But the intention and the spirit of having them in place, you would think were very good. So there you would score both Parliament and government for doing the right thing to put in place those policy frameworks, the institution, and the human resources. However, what is now very contradictory is that on one hand, for example, the government policy is that they would want to have free internet. And there was a time that program was launched here in Kampala that there would be open spaces where citizens can go and sit and access internet. But that is now contradicted by some of the activities we have seen from government. You have mentioned about the fear that is in the citizenry about somebody listening to their conversation. I'm sure all of us have had that opportunity. You want to meet someone, you want to talk to them. They say, I have something I want to tell you, but we have to meet in person because I cannot relay it over the phone. That means that all citizens are living in fear that their conversations are being listened to, which of course will affect their privacy, as you have mentioned. You have seen the intimidation that goes on in public, right from, we have heard from the president when he mentioned and said, wherever you are, whatever you are saying over the internet, we are going to reach you. We have seen from security officers and high-ranking government officials. So we have seen the shutdown that you have mentioned of Facebook, of internet at some point, and then came Facebook up to now. And I must say that after radios and mobile phones, I think Facebook is the next platform, social media platform that many people subscribe to. Not many people are used to Twitter or even WhatsApp, but I think there are many people who are on Facebook. So you have seen that shutdown, how it has affected. You have seen arrest and what I could call fake prosecutions that have taken place. One case that comes to mind is Dr. Stella Nyanzi. You have seen many other people who have been taken in. We have seen censorship. I think there are radio stations and television stations that cannot air certain news in this country. They cannot host certain personalities in this country. They cannot discuss certain topics. So that high level of censorship across the digital spaces. You have seen the infiltration of the WhatsApp groups where people are strategically placed in WhatsApp group to intimidate people who are making contributions. If you try to go in a certain direction, you'll see something. We are watching you. We shall pick you soon. So what a contradiction it is that on one hand, the government has put in place and invested a lot to put in place these laws, to put in place the institutions, and also train people to be able to manage. But then, on the other hand, try to frustrate those very same efforts. The result of which are very clear. That one, you result in lack of information. You remember when we were coming to election, there were many people who did not know where they are going to vote from, whether it's the national ID which will be used, or you need a voters register. So basically, lack of information. And even till the day of voting, I'm sure that there were people who never knew candidates that they were supposed to go and vote for. You will see a withdrawn or a dormant citizenry. I think that has been backed up by statistics that the voter turnout has been very low. People lose interest because the digital platform that should enable them to participate in the democratic space are closed. So people will withdraw. Sometimes you see violence, you will see the propaganda, and it will lead to all that. And I want to agree with Madame Rose that yes, there are incidences where these platforms have been abused, some to a very high level. Even me personally, I experienced that, like on the eve of election, there were flyers going all over the internet, which had supposedly put me in a certain shrine in Nigeria, doing things for votes. So my voters were calling me and saying, we want to vote for you tomorrow, but we are told you're in Nigeria in a shrine and you are doing funny things there. So those isolated cases of abuses are there, but I still believe that it is not enough to move government to clamp down and completely frustrate the achievements that have been made so far. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Honorable, for lightening on those very aspects. So, still with you, Honorable, what would you consider to be some of the key strategies to consider by Parliament if it is to enhance actually democratic participation online? You could tell us just something in about 3 minutes. Over to you, Honorable.
Well, thank you very much. I think that Parliament has a responsibility of being responsive to the demands of the citizens. And we have already seen that some of the provisions of the law that Parliament had intended it to help in promoting democracy have been actually abused. So at this stage, I think one of the strategies would be for Parliament to start a process of engaging the stakeholders, have dialogues, have roundtables with the key stakeholders. For example, people who are in security, who are normally enforcing some of these regulations, people who are in civil society, people who are in the judiciary, for example, office of the DPP, to be able to deal with the contentious matters in some of the legislations that Parliament has passed. I think this would be one strategy of helping and enhancing the digital space. Of course, we have already heard how many Ugandans are now unable to access the internet because of the high charges. And Madam Ruth has mentioned about people who are doing businesses, people who are going to school. But I must also add that there are people whose politics are basically centered around digital spaces. That's where they do their politics best, and that is how Ugandans understand them. So if you see the excessive levies on the data, I think this is one area that must be reviewed. And since the tax laws are reviewed on an annual basis, this is one area that I think Parliament should completely do with. Probably even for some consumers, bundles that don't exceed a certain level per month or per year should be excluded totally from paying any form of taxes. Of course, it is not the responsibility of Parliament as an institution to raise awareness, but I also feel that members of Parliament should be able to do enough by reaching out and accounting to their constituents on some of the key legislations they have passed, and also pick up their ideas to be able to make better laws going forward. I thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Honorable. And then that would take me to, okay, maybe before I go to Madam Ruth Sekindi, I want to invite everybody who has a question. You can put it in the chat room. We'll be able to raise your questions. I would also request that if you have specific people that you'd want to answer your questions, you can attach the name of the panelists that you would want to respond to your question. But otherwise, we'll ensure that they try to respond to most of your questions. So picking on from there, I would like to cross to Madam Ruth Sekindi. Would also want to hear your views on what you think are the best or the key strategies for human rights bodies and agencies like Human Rights Commission to undertake in order to enhance democratic participation online or democratic rights online. So over to you, Ruth.
Thank you. When it comes to, I want to thank my fellow panelists for, I think, for everything they have raised. I am in total agreement. I'm forever humbled when I hear Ugandans very passionate about their country and raising real pertinent issues for the good of our country. So for me, I'll be talking about some of the strategies that institutions like Uganda Human Rights Commission are undertaking to enhance democratic engagement online. And here, like I said, we have already called out for the scrapping of the OTT because we believe that it should be scrapped off for reasons to enhance accessibility for every person, wherever they are on the internet. And we are glad that government has put up free zones, internet free zones. We are requesting that these are increased so that people in different neighborhoods can access internet free zones. Unfortunately, there are very few, and even in those places you find so many youth. And just because you find so many youth, it tells a story that many people cannot afford OTT. They need this internet for the jobs. They need to socialize. And if you want to keep the youth other than the literate, the semi-literate, the unemployed, busy, give them internet to become very active, to become innovative, to look at to broaden their scope so that we grow. And not only in democracy, but also our country will be able to grow with a lot of innovations. We have also been calling on responsive media, and we have written and had press statements calling for people who use the internet to be responsible so that we address issues of cyberbullying, fake news, misinformation, and disinformation. We have also reviewed a number of bills, and also because we have the mandate to review bills and advise government. So we've advised government on a number of bills like the UCC Act and other legislation. We also produced a booklet on issues of access to information and issues of media freedoms in Uganda, highlighting many of the issues that have been raised here. And we have made recommendations to Parliament and to other ministries, departments, and agencies that are relevant. So we have also been creating a lot of awareness in communities on the need to use media, the digital space responsibly. And also we have joined civil society in advocating for broadening of the civic space, because the civic space also has issues of digital spaces. And we have also been monitoring the human rights situation, and in our annual reports, since 2016, we have been talking about enabling the population use digital space for democratic purposes, and also speaking against the limitation of this digital space, because as a country, this is the way to go. We can't run away from it. It is with us. We have to just go with it and see how best it works for us. So we have also been advocating for e-governance and requesting every MDA to have an online information to ease accessibility for people. If it is Ministry of Agriculture, have everything you have to say on your website. People don't have to come to your offices or wait for a minister to speak. If it is parliament, let's have all the information, all the bills online so that everyone should be able to access them. If it is president's office, let's have everything that the president has said and the views online. Even political parties, we will need to know, to be reminded of your manifestos and what you stand for. Let's have them online so that I don't have to wait for a political leader to speak for me to know what they stand for. That will help us make informed decisions and also guide on accountability, transparency, and to improve our governance processes. We also have a complaints handling process where we receive complaints and we investigate complaints. We have continued to do that, as well as I've talked about reviewing laws. So that is what we are doing, and we intend to do more, particularly in monitoring the digital space. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Ruth, for giving us some of the key strategies that can actually be taken. So at this point is now when I cross to Robert Chiranga to give us some of the insights of the key strategies that actually civil society organizations should or can undertake to promote and protect or enhance civic participation online or democratic rights online. Over to you, Robert. Would like to hear some of your insights. Robert?
Sorry, Adrian, I got disconnected. The rains are too much here. Could you repeat your question?
So I was saying, Robert, that you can kindly also share some of the key strategies that you think civil society organizations should take to enhance the promotion and protection of democratic participation online. So that is where we're at. We'd like you to express some of those in about 2 minutes. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Adrian. I think we need to restructure our programming. As I had indicated earlier, our demography shows that 80% of our population constitutes young people. My view is that we should now involve young people in our programming who are more competent in the use of digital rights. And of course, we should continue our advocacy efforts with key institutions such as Parliament for a more enabling environment for the enjoyment of these rights to participation. I would love to see Parliament take on the executive to find out why they continuously suspend our funding modality of DGF, which has been an enabler for us to make use of this digital space. I would like to also see ourselves design strategies that can ensure that the digital divide is reduced to ensure no one is left behind by ensuring that digital space is accessible, digital space is affordable, digital space is available, and digital literacy is also available to ensure that people can make use of digital space in terms of effective participation in the governance affairs of this country.
Thank you very much, Robert. At this moment, I want to invite one participant to share a few insights, especially in relation to democratic participation online, and that is Mr. Nicholas Opio. I want to give you 5 minutes within which to share some few insights, and then we shall go to the question and answer session. We will promise that we'll try to attend to as many questions as possible. You can keep the questions coming. So over to you, Nicholas, to share some of a few insights of your experiences and what you think can be done to better the digital democracy in this country. Over to you, Nicholas. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, and good morning from my end of the world. The panelists have had an exhaustive discussion and agree with a whole lot of the things that they have said, but I thought that there were 2 or 3 things that I wanted to share that perhaps you might find important, especially on what I see as the opportunities. But before I do that, just a cautionary remark about the place of the internet in democratic processes. At the onset of the new media space, democratic scholars of democracy, such as Larry Diamond from Stanford and Francis Fukuyama, proffered what they thought was great liberation to democratic processes, and even began a course on liberation technology, heralding the internet and new media as the news, the new thing that will accelerate democratic progress. But 20 years down the road, the very proponents of liberation democracies now admit the limitation and the pervasive use of the internet to pervert democratic processes. Many of you have heard about the use of the internet to interfere into elections of some countries. In Kenya, you've had the discussions around the British firm and how they manipulated the electoral process in Kenya. In Uganda, in the last election, you've had Facebook's analysis of what was called inauthentic communication that was organized and run by the government under the Ministry of ICT in the agency called GICC. So while we celebrate the importance of the internet as an accelerator to active participation in democracy, it can also be a very negative space in so many ways. The manipulation of public opinion, the use of it for spreading of hate and divisive communications. But that said, three things that I want to suggest as a solution to active participation on the internet. The first is the building of what I call a community of responsible users. The internet, like any other space, can be crowded with all kinds of malified intent and discussions. But when we build a community of active and responsible users, we minimize or mitigate those kind of negative impact. And then you can see, for example, in Kenya, what is called Kenyans online, Kenyans on Twitter. In Uganda, to a small extent, you have Ugandans on Twitter. These responsible communities of users can be vehicles for what I see as productive use of the internet, as what I see as moderated, self-moderated, holistic, impactful discussions that promote democratic participation. These groups can shut out negative forces, people who want to spread lies, misinformation. And they have some sort of leadership that I think the last president of Ugandans on Twitter was Hassan Kasinje. Now you have, I think, Patrick. I don't know how they elected, but you have a cabinet. And so that community of active and responsible users helps to grow and moderate discussions that are productive. The second thing that I think is important is the question of understanding the infrastructure of the internet, because there is inbuilt mechanism for safe debate, for reporting of hateful comments, but many of us don't understand it. There has to be an effort in educating people to understand that infrastructure. It is not perfect, but it's the right place to start in order for us to be able to use the space productively. So understanding the infrastructure, the inbuilt systems and tools for safe debate, safe reporting, and for isolating false news and false information. Lastly, is the overall question of media literacy, because democracy can only flourish and thrive when there is an informed, engaged, literate population. But social media, as we now know it, or the internet as we know it, has lots of dark spots. And therefore, in order to be able to use it productively, we have to understand how to verify information we find on the internet, because there's all sorts of conspiracy theories on the internet. And the only way to do it is to understand what I think is media literacy, how we can merge the two worlds of instant gratification and fast-moving news on new media and traditional media as a platform for verifying, authenticating debates and information. If we can do those three things, I think we will move the needle a little bit. I thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nicholas, for those insights into what can be done, for example, to ensure that we have an inclusive, all-inclusive internet that respects the rights of others and that promotes proper and useful use of the digital space for enhanced democratic participation. So at this point in time, would like to delve into some of the questions that have been raised by colleagues or participants of the meeting, as well as the comments they have raised. And of course, I've seen some of the comments, people saying that actually the law should be used to facilitate people's access to information as opposed to using it to deny them information. There are some questions here which someone asked that does government forget these rights when social media is switched off or limited at election times? And this has become a trend. The person is posing a question, of course, and it appears some of these aspects have actually been answered. But there's this question which is directed to Honorable Odul, that has Parliament considered assessing the efficacy of the laws on digital rights implementation in some cases in this particular country? So, Honorable, could you kindly respond to that in brief?
Well, thank you very much. Unfortunately, Parliament does not have its own mechanism of assessing the efficacy of the legislations it passes. However, we rely on the feedback we get from the different institutions, one of which is with us, Uganda Human Rights Commission. We have the Uganda Law Reform Commission. We receive petitions. We have a number of submissions from ministers when they bring their ministerial policy statements. So once those gaps are raised, and Parliament then can proceed, one, by accepting the proposals from government through the government bills, or if appropriate, through a private member's bill to address those very same gaps.
Thank you very much. And of course, some people are still raising, though this one says, thank you, Honorable Odul, for the fight. It is good that you are still committed to move the amendment to strengthen the fight. Government institutions such as the Uganda Human Rights Commission and Equal Opportunities Commission need to conduct studies that indicate how the tax is promoting exclusion in use and access of the internet, as well as restricting enjoyment of human rights like access to information. Of course, this person also asked that maybe Madam Ruth can respond, but the question is actually not very clear. And they're asking Honorable Odul that, can you actually commit to move an amendment to the Exercise Duty Amendment Act, remove the 12% exercise duty levy on data? So this is what they are posing to you, Honorable Odul. What do you think? What would you give in response to that person?
Well, thank you. I did respond in the chat, but my point was that when the proposal came to scrap the OTT and replace it with the 12%, I am on record for opposing it completely. I moved in the House that it should be scrapped, but at that time, the numbers could not favor me and our side. So when the opportunity comes in the next processing of the tax bills, 2022, 2023, I still commit, and I believe that the tax rate should actually go away completely.
Thank you very much. And then there are some questions which are directed to Ms. Ruth Sekindi. And they're asking you, for example, has the Uganda Human Rights Commission raised any concerns of Facebook being blocked in Uganda with the authorities? And many users had moved to using Facebook for business since the lockdown and the restrictions and the effects of cash flows. So the main catchphrase here is whether the Uganda Human Rights Commission has actually done anything to push maybe for opening of Facebook, or anything to dialogue and find out why actually Facebook is blocked, and if there are any strategies that can be done to open it up. Over to you, Madam Ruth.
Thank you, Adrian. I think I indicated it before that as a commission, we have engaged UCC on this, and also the Ministry of Internal Affairs on this, because I think they worked together. And it was for, at the end of the day, the president, I think what we get is that they are in discussions with Facebook. At least that's what we got from the UCC, that they're in discussions with Facebook. They have put in place conditions for Facebook to consider. Unfortunately, Facebook is not forthcoming, but they've indicated that they are still continuing with the discussion. And I think they've briefed the president on that. So at the end of the day, it is for us, we have put out the rights involved and the limitations following the closure. And we can, our weapon really, and what we can do is speak and write and speak and write some more. So for us, we can commit that we shall continue doing that and putting it to government, that the continued closure of Facebook and the continuation of having OTT limits accessibility on access to information. So that we are doing and we shall continue doing. And I think Mr. Mugoya still asked about UTRC, the studies that we've made on OTT, yes, and we have written that in our second annual report, talking about the impact of OTT on Uganda and how it has impacted on the rights in Uganda, particularly the right to education, the rights of PWDs, who, for example, persons with visual impairment use phones and all these gadgets to be able to communicate, or persons with speech impairment and hearing impairment are using phones to communicate, and how Facebook is affecting that, including students, university students, high school students. And we have indicated the fact that if we're going to do use digital platforms in good governance and development, because that is where we're going, or that's where we are, it limits development of our country. So as a commissioner, as a national institution, we have raised these issues. We have written in the annual report, and we asked Parliament to debate some of these issues, and we have continued to publicize them in the platforms that we get. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And of course, someone notes that, of course, much as the panelists some panelists have noted that there's expansion of the digital space, but others have noted that actually this space is also equally shrinking, and they're drawing reference to what happened earlier this year with the shutdown of the internet, as well as Facebook, which is still inaccessible, and then the removal of OTT tax yet replaced with a 12% levy. So they are asking an open a ticket question that, for example, at what point can government limit access to digital rights to protect state security? Is there a known process, and is it followed? So maybe Madam Ruth, you could respond to this. And I could ask, I think I'll ask one of anyone in the participants list who is willing. Probably Nicholas can also give some insight on this. So Madam Ruth, over to you on this particular question.
I beg your pardon, which question?
The question reads that at what point can government limit access to digital rights to protect state security? Is there a known process, and is it followed? That is the question.
What I can say is that other than the 4 non-derogable rights that we have in the Constitution, the freedom from torture, cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, the right to habeas corpus, the freedom from slavery, the right to fair hearing, all the other rights can be limited. However, that limitation has to be justifiable in a democratic society. And that limitation should be proportional to the threat. It should be lawful. It should be acceptable and necessary. So, of course, government will use security, and many times in this case, they were saying that there were threats of security and threats on the country. we don't know about that. We're not security officers. But we're saying that whatever limitation it should be, let them use the human rights-based approach. Let them do whatever they do in line with legislation. It should be necessary. I don't think it was necessary, but when you speak to security, they will convince you that it's necessary. So yes, and never forget that the state has and yields a lot of power. But the best that we can do is to speak and direct them to respect human rights and respect all rights equally, because they're all fundamentals of democracy. So any limitation should be proportional to the threat. I don't know what the threat was. It should be lawful, it should be acceptable, and should be necessary. Now, whether it was necessary and acceptable and lawful, that is really a topic for another day. It's another debate for another day. Yeah, maybe my fellow panelists and colleagues, Nicholas, can come in and join.
Thank you. Maybe Nicholas, if you can give some small highlight on this.
Well, thank you. Ruth is absolutely right. The freedom of information, of expression is not an absolute right. It can be derogated. She's also right about the conditions and circumstances under which they can be derogated. What is demonstrably justifiable in a free and democratic society. But the use of national security as a pretext for violation of this right has become a very hot topic for discussions, primarily because of the opaque nature in which these processes are undertaken. The government can say, oh, national security, it is classified. But I think there's proper guidance in the national human rights frameworks, and in particular, the Siracusa principles, that interprets the application of the ICCPR, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and dedicates a whole section on what national security is. And if I may read just a small portion of it, it says that national security may be invoked to justify measures limiting certain rights only when they are taken to protect the existence of the nation or its territorial integrity or the political independence against force or threat. That national security cannot be invoked as a reason for imposing limitations to prevent merely local or relatively isolated threats to law and order. In other words, if there is a localized threat to law and order in, say, Nakawa, or say in Itojo, in Tungamo, we cannot invoke national security as a justification for limiting rights in those isolated cases. And this kind of guidance has to be infused in what I think is a culture of maintaining law and order in our country. The last one is that we use national security really for regime protection as opposed to, because the primary obligation of the state is to enhance the enjoyment of the right, okay? In a way that if there's a large crowd demonstrating, somebody is causing problems, that person causing problems must be safely removed to allow the rest of the people to continue enjoying their rights. To adopt blanket measures such as shutting down the internet, shutting down social media, is to punish everybody else for the transgression of perhaps a very small percentage of our population. And in that, therefore, such actions become illogical. I think that we must demystify, we must democratize what is called national security, enhance the oversight role of parliament. In many countries, even courts, if there are matters of national security, there's a provision for limited access for people involved to examine, to conduct oversight. I don't think parliament has complete oversight on our national security issues. They don't know, for example, the strength of our military, the national threat to national security, because they say this is classified information. So we must democratize national security, make it accountable and subservient to the population, as opposed to the population being subservient to the armed forces. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nicholas. We really do appreciate everybody for those responses. And then, of course, thank you, Honorable Dul. I see you responded to some questions online. Someone asked, does Parliament plan on translating some of the sensitive policies like the Regulation of Interception of Communications Act, Computer Misuse Act in local languages to ensure that every Ugandan understands these laws? And I think Honorable tried to say it's not the mandate of Parliament to do that, but because this mandate is for the executive, I am aware though that some efforts have been made by CSOs to translate some of these laws in their areas of interest. Yes, Mr. Robert Chiranga, what do you say? Have you done some of these? Because Honorable Odul says he's aware that some CSOs, what as a coalition for HRDs, what can you say to attest to this? Have you done something to ensure that people can actually receive or access some of these documents in languages they understand? Over to you, Robert.
Thank you, Edwin. I think some of our member organizations, for us, we are a secretariat, but we have the Human Rights Center Uganda, which is in charge of doing research and documentation, including translation of policies and laws. But as I told you earlier, most of the civil society organizations that do this kind of translation of policies and laws have been affected by the suspension of the the funding modality known as DGF. So these are challenges that we need to address if we are to have these laws disseminated in some of the local languages like Luo, Runyakitara, Luganda, and Swahili. It's quite a big challenge and it's quite costly for civil society organizations to get experts in these languages to be able to correctly interpret them, have them printed and disseminated. So that's one of the call I want to make to Honorable Odur as a member of Parliament to look into the matters of the suspension of the DGF fund if we are to make any progress.
Thank you very much, Robert, for that response, and want to categorically state that it is all our responsibility, especially civil society organizations, to play a complementing role of alongside government to do some of these works by translating the laws and doing simplification and analysis to ensure easy reading and understanding by the citizens. So I also want to remind all our participants that we have put a link for a form on which you're supposed to register. Kindly do register because it is based on this that you'll have a modest refund of your data that you have used for this meeting. Please click on the link and put in your details so we can have all your details for sending your data. Someone also notes that there are wide exemptions, especially in the Access to Information Act, and they are against the spirit of the Act. Security institutions wrongly apply the Act in the guise of national security. So I think this is a comment and is not probably directed to anyone. So as a moderator, I want to say thank you everybody for attending and listening to me in this meeting. And at this point in time, I wish to hand you back to our key coordinator and lead person, Asimwe John, to take on from here, especially with the way forward and what follows after this meeting. Thank you very much for listening to me. I wish you all the best. Over to you, Asimwe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adrian. Thank you so much, our panelists this afternoon. I'm very sure all the participants have equally enjoyed and learned a lot from all of you. Thank you so much for your time. The one thing that we will certainly take it on is the conversation with the Uganda Human Rights Commission and see how some of the issues that have been raised herein are incorporated or taken on in their reporting annually. But also the most important thing is with Honorable Dul, we will certainly be knocking your door on the discussion of the 12% reduction for the financial year 2020 to 2023. Like Adrian has mentioned, please do fill the form before you log out, because that's the only way we will be able to reach out to you with a very, very modest reimbursement of the data that has been used today. But again, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Nicholas Opio, it is always a pleasure hearing from you and your views on matters that you hold dearly. Ms. Ruth, the ICNL team, the USAID civil society strengthening activity, and the partners, LastNet, CPESA, Chapter 4, and the coalition. Thank you so much for your time, but also the East-West Management Institute for facilitating this discussion this afternoon and for the support that you rendered to us. We look forward to interacting with you further on this discussion, because as CPESA, we hold it so dear, and we hope together with everyone that has attended this meeting this afternoon, we will certainly be able to continue with the conversation and see to it that all the citizens, all Ugandans are able to enjoy the digital spaces and certainly participate in the democratic processes. Thank you very much, and I wish you a blessed evening. Hello, everyone. I hope you have finished filling up or registering for the data reimbursement form. Please do so, because we will be closing this meeting in the next 2 minutes. So if you haven't, kindly fill it right now. Thank you.